Hi everybody, it's Simon from OnBrand Films, and I've teamed up with Red Shark News to show you how I turn this into that. Let's go. Alright, so today we've got a little bit of a longer tutorial, but what I'm going to show you is my workflow for dealing with time lapses. So what I like to do first of all is to rename my footage, and I do this with Automator. So Automator is a great little program which you can do loads of things in, which is native to OS X. What I do is I navigate to where my footage is kept, and we have the normal naming structure here that the camera provides us. So I take all of those files, drop them into Automator here, find the change name function within Automator, and rather than changing the name, I'm going to add text to the file extension. I'm just going to call this cheddar tut, separating that with underscores, and I'm going to put that before the file name. So it gives you an example of what you can expect here. So if you watch in this folder, when I hit run, it renames all of those files for us, which is great. That's exactly what we want. So we'll close that, don't save the workflow. Next, what I like to do is open this up in LR Timelapse. LR Timelapse is a way of dealing with raw time lapses that you've shot, and it enables you to do things like set keyframes for values like exposure, white balance, etc. There's loads of material online explaining how to do this, so I'm just going to kind of fly through really quick, and we'll put some links in the description to where you can find some more in-depth tutorials on this program. But anyway, we navigate down to where we find our footage, and mine is on the desktop in this folder, and it'll import all of that for us. So once all that information has been loaded in, we need to create where we want our keyframes and how many we want. So what we're going to do now is just hit the keyframe wizard, and it's cropping up saying that our aperture has not been defined, and that's because I was using a manual lens with no pass-through of this information. So what we need to do is tell LR Timelapse an aperture value, and we're just going to set it to f8. I'm not sure what I shot this on, but that will do for us now. So once we've done that, we can define how many keyframes we want. And if you look on the left-hand side here, as I slide this, it's showing us where those keyframes are positioned. And by default, it does this, evenly throughout. So what we actually want is we probably want one at the start, one here, and one on this kind of luminance change here. This blue line is our kind of overall luminance. And as you see, it kind of peaks at sunset and then starts to drop down. This here, this little kind of upward spike, is where I changed the shutter speed just to allow a little bit more light in. And what that is going to do is kind of just up an exposure a little bit there. And what we're going to do is smooth that out. So rather than add them even space using this tool, we're going to go to where it starts to drop, about there, and we'll add them manually just by clicking this here. We'll go to the beginning here, where just before it spikes, add a keyframe. And then what we'll do is where it kind of levels out, we'll add another keyframe. Oh, there we go. That one didn't add, so we'll do that just again. About there. There we go. So once those are added in, and we'll probably drop one at the end as well. We'll do that. So what we're going to do is save all of that metadata to those files. And then we'll open up Lightroom. And over in the library module in grid view, and I think you specifically have to have it in grid view, you take this tab here, drag it into Lightroom, and drop it into the library. And yes, we want to import. So as Lightroom just kind of goes through and imports all of that footage, we'll just wait for that to do its job. Okay, so that's done. Now what we need to do is find those keyframes, and luckily for us, just resize this window. Luckily for us, it adds, which is really handy, a keyframes filter here. So we go down to LRT 4 keyframes, and these are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 keyframes that we added. So let's start on the first one. Switching over to the Develop tab, we will start to make our adjustments. So as you can see, the sky is more or less properly exposed, but that means the rest of the foreground and kind of background is really underexposed. So what I am going to do is maybe just go up on exposure by, I don't know, 0.5, something like that. Just a really quick edit here. Raise the shadows, drop the highlights, get a bit more definition back in that, and just tweak those blacks, and maybe try bringing out some of that rock with this white. No, we won't do that. Okay, so that's that done, and this is a really quick edit. I mean, you can spend as much time as you want. I was shooting this on a Rokinon 16mm, great little lens. Let's just kind of change that. Okay, great. So that's a really quick basic grade there. Well, color correction there, and exposure correction. Now moving over to our gradient filters. LR Time-Lapse does add its own. So what you can do, or what you should do, is use the ones provided. Don't use your own. I mean, you shouldn't be wanting to use more than 4 anyway. So we're going to take this one, which is positioned about right for us. Just drop the exposure on the sky a little bit, and just tweak that temperature just to make it a little bit more of the orangey colours from that sun. And I'm going to bring down some of those highlights, put a little bit of contrast in, and maybe some clarity and dehaze. Well, not too much, maybe about 5. So that's kind of the rough workflow there. So, like I said, maybe you'd like to spend a bit more time on yours, but in the interest of time, I'm going to do this rather quickly. So what we want to do now is apply these settings to the rest of our keyframes. And what we can do is select all down here, select all of our keyframes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, go into our scripts tab and sync keyframes. And what that does is synchronize all the settings across. And now, just kind of eyeballing it, I'm going to go through and just make some slight adjustments in exposure. Maybe we kind of just, just go up a tad here, I think. Yeah, and then we'll synchronize that again to the rest of them. Great. Move to our next keyframe. We can see we're a lot darker on this keyframe to that keyframe. So what we're trying to do is match these. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift this one, so keyframe number 3, to that one, I think. And we'll do that, maybe go up to 0.9. No, a bit more. Just until we get it close enough. And that was where our shutter value changed when we were shooting this. And that's close enough for me. What I might do is just tweak the temperature again. Like that. Great. Come over to our, well, synchronize our keyframes again, sorry. And now because we synchronized, we need to bring this down on exposure to match. We have to remember this is sunset as well, so it can be a little bit darker, or should be a little bit darker, because the sun is going down. Okay, that's great. Let's synchronize that again. And then we go to our final keyframe. And I think maybe we'll just lift it a little bit. Oh, not 6. 0.6. And maybe just lift those shadows a little bit again. Okay. So, what I am going to do is make another little adjustment, just put some clarity in there. And rather than synchronizing, because we've only got 5 keyframes, I'm just going to do this manually, really quick, because it's only one value that we're actually changing. Okay, great. So that is that done. What we need to do now is I'm going to go back into the library module, select all, right click, and save that metadata to file. So once that's done, we'll hop back into LR time-lapse, and we're on the second row down now, reload all of that metadata, and you can see that our keyframes have been adjusted here, but everything else is set as it is. So what we want to do is auto transition from keyframe 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 and then to 5. So luckily we can do that, and this is the strong part, the really powerful part of LR time-lapse, is that it has auto transition. So we just click this, wait for it to process, and there we are. And we can save that down, and that's going to save all the metadata for every single frame now. Back into Lightroom, just disable that filter in the bottom right hand there, select all, right click, down to metadata and read metadata from files. And that's going to go through and apply the transitional settings between each frame. And we'll just wait for that to be done. Up in the top left, we've got this little progress bar. And great, that's done. So hopping back into LR time-lapse. There's a lot of back and forward, I know, so try and keep up with that. We're actually going to do a visual preview, which will give us a preview in our left-hand window here to see what our time-lapse looks like. So we'll quickly do that. Okay, so after that process is complete, we can start scrubbing through our time-lapse and taking a look at what the final result will look like. So this is hit play and just take a quick look. So as you can see, it's quite a windy day, and the camera is actually on a time-lapse motion controller system by Syrup, which is great, and we've shot a couple of tutorials on that, so if you want to go and look at those, I highly recommend you taking a look. But what you might notice is that we do have a bit of flicker going on here, with the exposure just kind of jumping around a bit. It could be a little bit smoother. This is where the visual deflicker comes in handy. So if we click the visual deflicker, it gives us this line over the luminance line here. So what we can do is we can start to smooth that out. You don't want to go crazy smooth, but you just kind of want those values to give a nice little bit of smoothing across it all. So we hit apply, that processes. We hit save again to save the metadata to file, and then we take all of that back into Lightroom, select all, right click again, metadata, read metadata from files, That will update with our progress bar on the top left of the Lightroom panel here. So now all those files are up to date and we are ready to export. So what we're going to do now is hit File, Export, choose a location to save these, which is on my desktop. Save them in images. Okay, great. We're going to export them as a JPEG sequence at the original resolution. We're not going to resize them. This is to keep, you know, a bit of flexibility in post. Yeah, and then we're going to hit export and just wait for Lightroom to do its thing. So here we are inside of After Effects. Lightroom has finished processing our images for us, and we're just going to do some quick post-production and export the final video. So we want to do new project. I'm just going to resize this window. Let's navigate to our files. They are on the desktop, and I've saved them in the image here. So highlight that, import as image sequence. Okay, so let's start a new composition. I'm outputting 25 frames a second, 1920 1080. Let's call this cheddar tut. Okay, so we drag and drop our time lapse to the timeline. I'm just going to resize our work area here. Hit N and composition. Trim comp to work area. Okay, great. So, as you can see, our exported image is a lot larger than our output. And I've done this because it allows us some flexibility in post. So let's scale this down to about the right size. We shot this in 4:3 and we're actually outputting to 16:9. I find that useful just in case I want to do some tilts or just quickly recompose our image, which I'm going to do now. So I'm going to change the position slightly. Around there seems good to me. And as it was quite a windy day, we actually do have a little bit of movement, as you can see, where the wind was blowing the camera and kind of nudging it a bit. So to fix that, what I'm going to do is use our good old friend warp stabilizer. So just grab that there, drop that onto our footage, and just wait for that to process. Okay, so now that we've warp stabilized our footage, and it's got rid of that wobble that we were getting from the wind, we are good to export. So what I'm going to do is just find the in and out points where I want my time lapse to start and finish. So maybe about here is good. Set my end point, come up to File, File Export, that's what I'm after, add to render queue. So I'm going to export this as a QuickTime, probably 422 HQ, okay, okay, and I'll just find a location for that and we'll just save it here. Great. So there we have it. My workflow on dealing with raw time lapses using LR Timelapse and Lightroom. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and thanks for watching.